Hi, I'm Chris Walker, Head of Health and Safety at Napton's Health and Safety. Thanks for joining me again for this month's health and safety discussion, the focus of which is manual handling at work, a subject which is certainly relevant and of significant importance in the health and social care sector, and an area in which meeting your statutory duties and obligations is critical to ensure the protection of you, your business, your employees, and those who use your services. During this session, we're going to look at a number of important points on the subject of manual handling. We're going to look at some of the key terms and definitions, touch on the legal requirements, discuss the nature of the high hazard tasks and operations in your sector, and some of the fundamental actions required of you to reduce the risk of injuries arising as a result of manual handling activities. Before any of that, let's consider the case for paying proper attention to this subject. Is this really something that as a business owner or employer that you need to have on your radar? Aren't there other matters that are much more pressing, other concerns of higher significance and other risks to manage that are far more significant than those associated with lifting, carrying and moving stuff around your business or your premises? In general, across all industry sectors and workplaces around the world, there's evidence that risks associated with manual handling tasks fail regularly to be properly identified and understood, and often where they are identified, they are poorly managed. A simplistic view of the safe management of manual handling operations is often formed in organisations. We have identified that our workers lift and carry things and they move things about. Therefore, let's give them some training. Let's provide some information or training on how to do that lifting, do that carrying and that moving safely. Often, unfortunately, it doesn't really matter what the tasks being carried out are in the real world. The training will be focused on general principles and in many circumstances will completely miss the opportunity to cover the specific hazards faced by the worker. Also, in my experience, there's often a perception that manual handling injuries, bad backs, strains, sprains, and muscle pulls are the sort of inevitable injury that happen in the workplace. The effort and cost of sorting manual handling risks properly probably isn't worth it because there's an attitude of, well, we're still going to have problems. People are still going to have back trouble. People are still going to have mobility issues as a result of the work that we do. It's just one of the consequences of working here. This need not be the case though, and as an approach, it leaves plenty to be addressed, not least the risk of legal non-compliance and susceptibility to injury-related claims. Now, while training in safe handling or lifting techniques, if properly planned and relevant to the work being carried out, may well be a part of an effective solution, on its own, training is not a bulletproof strategy for preventing injury. And it certainly doesn't, when it's provided in isolation, provide everything that's required to fully meet an employer's obligations under the relevant health and safety legislation. The evidence that, in general, we're not getting manual handling right in the UK is freely available and clear for all to see. The latest Health and Safety Executive Workplace Health and Safety Statistics for the period 2019-2020 indicate that 30% of new and long-standing work-related ill health cases are actually due to musculoskeletal disorders, and that 27% of all of the working days lost due to work-related ill health are because of these types of conditions. The report indicates that 500,000 workers are suffering from work-related back, muscle, joint type disorders, and there were 152,000 new cases of these types of conditions in 2019-2020. Manual handling activities are found to be one of the main causes of these work-related musculoskeletal disorders, along with workstation risks, including the use of display screen equipment. Rates of work-related musculoskeletal disorders vary across industry sectors, with workers in the human health and social work sectors amongst those industries with a substantially higher incidence rate than the general working population. When we consider these work-related ill health figures, alongside the fact that handling lifting or carrying is reported to be involved or a contributory factor in 19% of all riddle reportable injuries, which result from workplace accidents, it's clearly an issue of significance. Generally, work-related ill health and injury is estimated to be a £16.2 billion problem in the UK annually. Manual handling is a significant contributor to this number, and if you're listening to this recording, you probably work in, own or operate a business in which manual handling is one of your most significant hazards. Now, moving, handling and assisting people in the health and social care sector is not only a hazardous activity of significance because it's carried out so frequently and by so many workers in the sector, but because it sets off virtually all of the manual handling risk assessment alarm bells. I've spent many hours talking to businesses of all types about the risks associated with manual handling tasks. And rarely, if ever, do you come across situations where the risk assessment considerations are as complex as those required for the handling of people. We're not talking about lifting and carrying a cardboard box here, are we? The person to be moved or assisted is not one that's always going to be entirely cooperative or predictable. The weights required to be handled will vary significantly and again can vary unpredictably during a task. Not everyone, unfortunately, comes with pre-installed handles, a label telling you how much they weigh, and of course you can't necessarily set all the parameters of the environment in the way you'd wish to do either in all circumstances. I always feel a little at risk of sounding insensitive when I'm talking about the fact that the important bit of health and safety legislation on this subject, the Manual Handling Operations Regulations 1992, defines manual handling as the transporting or supporting of a load, including lifting, putting down, pushing, pulling, carrying or moving, by hand or bodily force, and that a load is a discrete movable object, and this definition includes not only boxes and packages, but also people and other materials. People are loads as far as our manual handling responsibilities go, and they're just about the most complicated and hazardous load that I've come across. The general duties of employers under these manual handling regulations are firstly to avoid the need for manual handling, as defined just a moment ago, wherever they reasonably practicably can. For example, could you bring the treatment to the patient rather than move the patient to the treatment? Where any element of manual handling can't be avoided altogether and the work involves a risk of injury, the risks need to be assessed and reduced to the lowest level that's reasonably practicable. Employers, in carrying out this risk assessment, must take account of those with specific vulnerabilities, including risks to young persons, pregnant workers, and those with a history of manual handling injury or other injury which may impact their handling capabilities. You'll need to consider the manual handling needs and risks of each service user on an individual basis. Risk assessments and handling plans for individuals must be in place, regularly reviewed and updated as necessary. Don't forget that it's not just people that your employees are moving and handling. There are tasks throughout your organisation that need to be assessed. The HSE provide extensive guidance on the manual handling risk assessment process and health and social care specific guidance in HSG 220 on manual handling risk assessment in the sector. Before I finish, I'd like to set you a task for the month ahead. Take a look at how well you're doing on managing the risks from manual handling tasks in your business. Have you taken steps to avoid manual handling where it's reasonable and practicable to do so? Have you assessed the risks from manual handling tasks generally in your organisation? And is manual handling and movement of service users adequately covered in individual, person-centred risk assessments and handling plans? Is lifting equipment provided in order to avoid or reduce manual handling tasks? And if so, are the users of that equipment suitably trained in its operation? Is the equipment subject to regular maintenance and inspection, as well as subject to statutory examinations where required? And have all of these inspections and examinations been completed in accordance with the required timescales? And are any defects identified adequately rectified? Finally, I'd like you to consider, has manual handling training been completed for all of those who are at risk of an injury? And if so, be honest, was it any good? Was it role specific? and did it really inform the employee how to avoid injury through adopting safe handling techniques, or was it just a tick in the box exercise? Talk to your employees and see if they feel safe completing the handling tasks they're expected to perform, and take action to address any issues identified. I'd really like to thank you all for taking the time to listen to this recording, and look forward to discussing further key health and safety topics with you in the coming months. Thank you and take care.